Welcome to Deep Dive with Esther. So this is a place where we connect with incredible people who are changing the world a brick at a time. Today I have the honor to have Tim Lueders-Dumont, who is running for state attorney for Addison County. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here.
Yeah.
And thank you for running.
Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So tell us more about your decision to run and why.
Yeah, so a lot of people want to know what the state's attorney does, first
Yes,
of all. So
that would be, I'll be honest, that would be so helpful.
No, and I think it's one of those things where I think it should be the responsibility of government employees to explain to people what they do as sort of a basic premise, and I think voter education is something that's a part of my campaign. So state's attorney, 99% of criminal crimes will be prosecuted by a state's attorney in a county. The Attorney General's office has statewide jurisdiction, but state's attorneys, other states, are called district attorneys. And you just think about it like a county prosecutor. So you get a DUI in Addison County, very likely to be referred to the Addison County State's Attorney's office. Or a domestic violence case, very likely to be referred. Sometimes there's jurisdictional questions, maybe a crime allegedly commenced in County A and finishes in County B. So the Attorney General's office might request that case.
Okay.
Or the state's attorney might refer a case to the Attorney General's office if there's a conflict of interest, if there is a nexus to something statewide.
Okay.
For example, trafficking and different things like that. And I'll nerd out as long as you want. But
no,
basically,
it's okay.
State's attorney is responsible for countywide public safety and law enforcement. And it's also the place where juvenile cases are filed.
Yeah.
And where what are called CHINS cases, where it's really the filing is really, for lack of a better term, against the parents. And so family court, juvenile court, and criminal court. And it can be very fluid in a small community, and you can sometimes see individuals in different parts of that system.
Yeah.
But state's attorney is a job that is part of our Constitution here in Vermont.
Yep.
And it's a constitutional office.
Wow.
Yep.
Wow. It sounds like it's almost like a heavy load and so important. So important to our community. When I think about to youth and children, and just because you deal with people who encounter DUIs, right? And just a vast amount of cases.
Really, any criminal conduct could be referred there under Vermont's criminal statutes, Title 13 mostly, and the driving laws are Title 23. But as to the reasons why, I grew up in Lincoln, just down the road.
Yes.
My parents were both public defenders here in Addison County, and so at the time, my father was with the law firm Sessions, Kiner, and Dumont, and they were the assigned public defender. So if you couldn't afford an attorney, you would be granted an attorney from that office right on Court Street here. And I spent many hours of many days of my childhood at the office on Court Street.
Yep.
And then my mother was a juvenile defender, so in the juvenile system, she would represent young people. And so, sometimes you don't need to over-explain it, but I'll just say that it informs my perspective.
Of course.
Everyone has a story about why they come into contact with the system, and I want to bring a 21st century outcome-based approach that's not focused on punitive and punishment measures, more focused on really the best way to describe the state's attorney position is the people's attorney. That's what you're supposed to be doing. When you're in court, you're representing the people. Sometimes they say the state, I like to say the people. And you got to remember that it's not Tim against defendant, it's the state, the people, and the other party. It happens to be a person who's been accused in many cases of a crime, and that presumption of innocence carries through, and the state has to remember that too.
And with all of that, so I understand your why. Your family sounds like they are so connected in this community. basically, Middlebury is your backyard. Growing up here and the work that your family did here, it has informed who you are and what you're deciding to do as you decided to run, which is exciting. When was the moment that you knew public service was for you? Because the call is great, the work is great,
Yep.
and almost tiring. The burnout sounds real. So
Yeah, no, I mean, talking to a member of a local select board, as I was saying before we started on here, your school board members and your
Yep.
select board members, your city council members, those folks are absolutely at the front lines of everything. You think about where our money is spent in Vermont, and the school boards and select boards, you folks are really doing important work that is often thankless. And people don't call out of the blue and say, "Hey, good job" at the meeting the other night. You ran a great meeting, And I think it is tiring. There is burnout. For me, I knew that I wanted to do government work since I was a kid. I grew up with Bush as president, and that really informed. At first, it was to go into journalism, and I still have. I mean, you think about some of the stuff that's happening now in our national perspective, and think about where we would be without proactive journalism. I remember listening to Democracy Now! With Amy Goodman. I actually tried getting that on public access in Bristol when I was a kid. But anyway, you think about that, and so journalism was something I was passionate about, and I realized somewhere that I wanted to change systems from within and help people. And so I worked for Peter Welch at a college here in Vermont in his Burlington office, doing constituent service work for veterans amongst other populations and other vulnerable folks in the state. And that was such an empowering experience, and also just getting to travel around the state with Congressman Welch. You meet so many people, you hear so many stories, and seeing, he was a public defender too, so there's a common thread in my life. And seeing that level of engagement with the community was great. From there, I went to go work for State Treasurer Beth Pierce, who's retiring now after 20 years in the Treasurer's office, 10 of which as State Treasurer. And that too, you're dealing with large statewide issues, and how can, for example, money affect people's lives, financial literacy affect people's lives, and housing issues. We got to deal with a lot. I mean, you look, where's the money, that you can find out where services are or where they are not. And I realized after working for Peter Welch for a couple years and Beth Pierce for 5 years that I wanted to become an attorney, and I didn't know I wanted to become a so-called prosecutor. I wanted to help people, help communities more directly. The statewide stuff is great, and you need really motivated people there, but I also wanted to work at a more local level. So I went to law school and worked for T.J. Donovan my first year, and then Sarah George my second year, and for a federal judge my third year. And that helped inform my decision. After the first semester of law school, I knew I wanted to do criminal work. And so that's where I'm at now. I work as a deputy state's attorney in Barry, in Washington County right now. Which is a very busy place. The opiate epidemic is affecting Vermont at a rate that is historically terrible and really devastating. And so that affects everything. And so do the housing issues. And other generational issues that you see. Why do people come into the criminal justice system? No one wanted to be there. So
Ooh, and for you to have that perspective, all those experiences to help inform you in the work that you will hopefully be doing soon. So when I think about all of your experiences, what values will lead your work?
The value system that I want to bring to the table has to be informed by the community here. And again, just keeping that reminder, one of my initiatives, if you will, is to have a countywide strategic plan for the office. And that means engaging with groups, and sometimes groups that aren't always getting along. And when you're in a countywide position at the local level, I'm not going to Montpelier every day. I do plan on going to Montpelier to advocate on issues that affect Addison County. I do not plan on staying silent on issues if they need to be voiced. I've talked to multiple people in the past couple months, and Addison County has a lot of growing issues.
Yeah.
Housing, it's so difficult to find a place to live in Addison County.
Absolutely.
It's so difficult to find childcare in Addison County, and it's so difficult to, frankly, thrive in lots of parts of this state. But in Addison County, you have to look at, we're a rural county.
Yep.
We're close to a lot of things, but we're also far from some things.
Yep.
And the value system is the way I was raised.
Yep.
To have respect for people in the, no matter where they come from. My mom talks about in the old courthouse here on Court Street, I was sometimes, for lack of childcare, I was with my mom. So she strapped me to the table.
Yes.
And we met with clients.
Yeah.
And the value system has to be informed by the community. Certainly, I have my own value system, which I would say is on the more liberal side.
Yeah.
So you have to bring your value system, but you have to listen to the community. So a strategic plan helps with that process, because I'm not going to come in here. I've drafted a strategic plan.
Yes.
I'm going to impose it on this place.
Yes.
You have to listen. And again, you might have someone at that table that does not typically agree with someone else at the table. But the act of, even if it's a draft strategic plan for 4 years, the act of drafting, I think, will help mend places that need to get some repair. And the act of drafting is doing, in that context, that, I believe in that collaborative approach. Yeah.
I love that. And how do you build trust with folks, and how do you network to create that draft and bring folks in to be collaborative?
I think it's finding the people that, I know that it's finding the people that are not asked enough to be at the table, to come to the table.
Of course.
And sometimes those individuals, those groups are right in plain sight.
Yes.
And when I worked for Sarah George, I helped in that office with a research project on fair and impartial policing. And one of the things that struck me in that process is, you can be a victim of a crime, a witness of a crime, and guess what? You may not have been born in this country, but you still are a key part of that equation. And so, for example, if you happen to have been born in Mexico and you live here in Addison County, you might be a victim of domestic assault, or you might be a victim of a negligent driving case, and you should be able to call the police and say, hey, something just happened to me. And so, for example, bringing migrant justice into the conversation here in Addison County, I know they're very present, but just making sure they're invited, that they're at the table, because sometimes they look at me and they don't know that my parents were public defenders. They don't know that the perspective, and I'm law enforcement to them. And that can be really intimidating.
Of course.
So I think it's going to meet them where they're at, and not just saying, hey, get on board. But there's certainly tough conversations that have to happen before you get people to the table sometimes. And sometimes people need to vent and say, like, here's how I've been wronged in the past, and just hear me out, kind of thing. Certainly working for a congressman, you hear a lot of people complain about what's going on.
I can imagine. And I love that. I love your openness to bring different people to the table, people that maybe are easily overlooked, but you're considering them. And so I understand that service, accountability, and community are also values of yours. Can you define each and what it would look like to live into those values as a state attorney?
So service is, the state's attorney should never forget that they're serving our community. That they are not there for other reasons. You're there to serve, you have a duty. So you have to keep that at the forefront of your mind. Who are you serving? You are constituent service. If you think about it from the perspective of, doesn't matter if you're working at the DMV counter or your state's attorney, people should be able to feel that they are being served by the office. So service to me looks like, public service is reflecting the community, listening to the community, also having your own integrity to stand up when an issue is perhaps unpopular. You need to remind people. One of the things that I unfortunately have had to remind folks of in the time that I've worked as a deputy state's attorney is, you do not persecute people, you prosecute criminal conduct. On said date, on said time, said
Yes.
person allegedly did this.
Yes.
And you remind people that the conduct is what you are actually litigating.
Yes.
You're not saying that person's a bad person. And so accountability for me is twofold. The second sort of prong that you mentioned. Thank you for checking my website.
Yeah.
But it's,
I did.
but it's, you know, it's accountability. So
Yeah.
I'm accountable to the voters,
Yep.
to the defendants too.
Yep.
They are voters, they are taxpayers, they are people in the community, their families. I have to be accountable to them, and that means holding the criminal justice system. Sarah George says this really well, but holding the justice system accountable. So if I see something in the courtroom that needs to be, discussed, potentially challenged,
Yep.
if I see a judge doing something that needs to be challenged, I'm an equal in that courtroom,
Nice.
representing the people, and so having that voice, holding the system accountable. If I see a defense attorney who's not communicating offers to their clients, making sure that on the record at a status conference I say the state's offer is the following to resolve this case. If I'm concerned about an offer not getting to an individual who needs to hear it.
Yeah.
And so it's accountability multiple different ways, and it's also, that the sort of core of prosecution is making sure that people that interact with the system, victims should be able to know that there's some accountability system in place that's both being responsive as an office, and also that serious crimes are dealt with in a serious manner, and that doesn't always mean it doesn't always mean sentencing. It doesn't always mean convictions. It means that the case is taken seriously, because my family home was actually the subject of someone came into the house and we weren't there about 10 or so years ago, and very likely a nexus to substance use disorder. And so it's accountability, knowing that there's something there.
Yeah.
Right? And then community values, is I think we've already discussed a little bit,
Yeah.
but it's about reflecting back into the community that the values that we have here. And when I look at Addison County, I know that as a county we have respect, for example, for people that happen to have been born in a different country that are here in this community.
Yep.
We have respect for all the people that come into contact with the system. And that means one day a defendant might be accused of a crime, the next day they're a witness to the crime, the next day they're a victim to the crime.
Wow.
So they might be my key witness in the next case. So I have to
Yeah.
maintain respect, integrity
Yes.
for that person, because they might be my star witness in the most important case that the office faces. A serious case, a murder case, a homicide case, and different serious cases. Some defendant that I had in a DUI, for example, might be my key witness in the future.
Wow.
And I want that relationship to be strong, and for them to know that it's never about personal stuff, right? It's about the state of Vermont, people being represented in the courtroom, and that it's not personal.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow, thank you. It sounds like you see people as people, and you see the human side, and there's a level of respect there as I hear you talk about even what happened to your family with somebody breaking in, right? You understanding that there's some things that may have happened that put them in that position, but seeing folks as people. I think all people want to be seen.
Yeah.
And with the job, it sounds like you see folks at maybe their most vulnerable.
Usually their worst day. Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
And for me, that's an everyday. I'm in the courtroom all the time. It's my job. It's a place actually I feel very comfortable. I enjoy going to the courthouse, but
Nice.
understandably, most people don't enjoy going into courthouses.
Yes.
Unless they're getting married or becoming a nationalization and citizenship. Those are good reasons to go to a courthouse,
Yeah.
for sure. But majority of reasons are usually kind of tough.
Of course. And walking folks through that is so important.
Yeah.
And as I think about your mom who took you in and would take you to work, I think about my kiddos who are back there, who are
I was thinking the same thing. Yep. I'm sure they've sat through some Zoom meetings the past couple of years, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They were with me in the select board meeting, earlier this week.
Yep.
But but it's all a part of it, making our community better and bringing our families in, and a huge value that I hear from your family too is just bringing you in, and how that is key to where you are now, and help open your eyes to a different world and help you understand the world and want to change it.
Yeah, I mean, criminal defense attorneys, I have the public defender here in town is fantastic, Attorney Grattan. And you know, my opponent in this race, Eva Vikos in the primary, she's a juvenile defender. That is incredibly important work. That's what my mom did.
Yes.
You know, so you know, sometimes things in politics can get really intense.
Yeah.
Because it's you're putting yourself out there.
Yep.
And I certainly have helped people run for office for the last decade, and it's very interesting trying to transfer those skills to yourself. Certainly my wife, Ashlyn, and my mom, my dad, my sisters, my friends, you know, the people of this community were the wind in my sails to do this campaign. And some of the reasons that I ran, criminal defense attorneys that I work with every day said they believed in me. You know, sure, I'm not a 40 years as a prosecutor, but I think it's experience that I have the last 4 years plus judgment.
Yes.
And if you have a lot of experience and you have a tough time making tough calls, then you're going to struggle. If you have a great time, you know, doing, you know, I can make all sorts of decisions, but you don't have some experience to inform that. That's tough too. And for me, I'm bringing a breadth of 10 years of experience across statewide and federal office, and now county office too. And so I've seen the different levels of government, and now sometimes government doesn't work very well for people. And I get that frustration for sure.
So I'm happy you took the deep dive with us today. So thank you so much for being here. But I'm also happy to hear that you're running and that you are accepting the challenge, right, and doing the hard work, seeing people on their worst days, but still helping them through the process. So thank you. Thank you for putting yourself out there. Thank you for saying yes. And I wish you all the best as you go forth. So thank you.
Thank you, and thanks for your work on the select board.
Of course, of course, of course. Thank you.